Today, we're digging into a case that went cold for more than a decade. It's a story about a brutal murder that happened on a downtown sidewalk in the middle of the afternoon, and it left a family searching for justice and investigators with a puzzle that, for the longest time, seemed absolutely impossible to solve. All right, let's get into it.
You know, so often these stories begin and end with these small, everyday moments, don't they? This right here. This was the last message Eliza Sherman would ever send. Just a simple, loving text to her best friend, only minutes before her life was taken, in the most violent way.
So, our story takes us to a late Sunday afternoon. We're in downtown Cleveland, and the stage is being set for a crime that would just defy all expectations and end up haunting the city for years to come.
So let's talk about who Eliza Sherman was. She was this beloved 53-year-old mother and a truly brilliant fertility nurse. I mean, think about that. She spent her days literally helping create families, being this source of sunshine for so many people, all while she was navigating the incredibly painful final stages of her own difficult divorce.
Okay, so let's walk through how this completely ordinary Sunday just spiraled into an absolute nightmare. At 4:30 in the afternoon, Eliza shows up for a really important meeting with her lawyer. Her big divorce trial was set to start the very next morning. But for almost an hour, she's seen on security cameras just waiting, pacing back and forth in the cold, checking her phone. Then, around 5:20, a hooded figure seems to emerge from the shadows. Screams suddenly cut through the quiet afternoon air, and less than an hour later, Eliza Sherman was gone, stabbed 11 times.
Right away, investigators on the scene were struck by what didn't happen. I mean, this was not a robbery. Her phone, her jewelry, all of her stuff was still with her. There was no sign of a sexual assault. No, this was personal. It was targeted. And honestly, that made it even more terrifying.
And that's when it began. A long, incredibly frustrating wait. For over 10 years, this case went completely cold. But for the people who loved Eliza, the fight for answers, well, that never, ever stopped.
You know, that initial investigation was just a maze of dead ends. The motive? It was a ghost. It wasn't a robbery. The suspect on the security camera footage was basically a phantom, completely covered up. The murder weapon vanished into thin air. And a key person of interest, her estranged husband, he just lawyered up and went completely silent.
For 10 long years, this was the painful reality. Every single year, on the anniversary of her murder, Eliza's loved ones would gather. They'd hold signs, they'd light candles, and they held on to this fierce, unwavering hope that her story would not be forgotten.
And this quote from her best friend, Jan Lash, it just perfectly captures the spirit of that fight, you know? They couldn't change the horrific thing that happened, but what they could do was dedicate themselves to finding the person responsible.
Then, nearly 3 years after the murder, the case took a very, very strange turn. The investigation started looking at the one person Eliza was actually there to see that day, her own divorce attorney.
So get this, a grand jury indicted him, but the charges had absolutely nothing to do with her murder. Instead, it was this bizarre list of accusations, things related to dishonesty and, of all things, bomb threats.
When you look at these charges, a really disturbing pattern starts to emerge. It's not just about dishonesty in Eliza's case. We see a history of fraud, and, this is the wildest part, causing public panic. Investigators found out this wasn't some one-off thing for Moore. He apparently had a habit of calling in bomb threats to courthouses. It was this desperate, crazy tactic to delay trials he just wasn't ready for.
So, Moore eventually pleads guilty to some of the lesser charges. He ends up serving 6 months in jail and gives up his license to practice law for good. But for Eliza's family, you can imagine it was such a hollow victory. The main question, the only question that mattered, who killed their mother, that remained completely unanswered.
For years, the case was just defined by silence. The vigils kept happening, the questions just lingered. But behind the scenes, cold case detectives were meticulously re-examining every single piece of this puzzle. And after 12 long years, they were finally ready to make their move.
In May of 2025, an arrest was finally made, a moment that so many people thought would never, ever come.
And the man taken into custody? Gregory Moore, her former attorney. Prosecutors were now alleging he wasn't just a liar who called in bomb threats. They said he was a killer who had actually orchestrated the murder of his own client.
So how did they get here,
right? I mean, what could possibly be the motive? What is the prosecution's theory of what actually happened that day?
Well, according to the indictment, this was no random attack, but a cold, calculated plot. Prosecutors allege Moore lured Eliza downtown for a meeting he never, ever planned to keep. Then, he went off the grid, disconnecting his phone to cover his tracks. And in that window of silence, they say an assailant, either Moore himself or someone working with him, ambushed and killed her. And to top it all off, he allegedly created a fake alibi, even calling Eliza's phone over and over long after he knew she was gone.
So here it is, the why. Prosecutors allege the motive was just mind-blowing in how callous it was. They say Moore was completely unprepared for Eliza's really difficult divorce trial, which, remember, was scheduled to start the very next day. And just like with his other cases, he allegedly resorted to an extreme, violent measure to cause yet another delay.
So as this case now heads to trial, it really forces us to look beyond the crime itself and reflect on Elijah's life and this profound sense of betrayal that's at the absolute heart of this story.
And this just says it all about the person she was. Long before her name became a headline, it was a source of hope for people. As a fertility nurse, she helped bring countless families into the world. That is a legacy of life and creation, and no act of violence can ever erase that.
At its core, this case is about trust. I mean, we turn to lawyers for protection during our most vulnerable times, right? Eliza was in the middle of a painful divorce, and she was relying on her attorney to guide her through it. The prosecution's case alleges that the very person she trusted to be her shield was in fact the architect of her death. It's just chilling.
And that brings us right back to where we started, to those final moments. After Eliza texted, "Thanks for our talk, love you," her best friend, Jan, of course, replied, "I love you back." Just a simple, reflexive exchange between two people who loved each other.
And really, that's what makes this story so haunting. Most days don't feel historic when we're living them. They just feel ordinary. A quick text message, a meeting downtown. Cases like this stay with us because they're such a stark, brutal reminder of just how fragile those ordinary, everyday moments truly are.